Hello, thank you for joining me. I'm going to explore a topic I find interesting. This is our human soul. Lately, I've just been thinking about how we are spirit, body, and soul. I think in the church and in society, we concentrate a lot on some aspects of ourselves and then neglect at least one. In the church, for example, we tend to think about the spirit person, make sure that you are obviously born again, make sure that you are spirit filled, led by the Spirit, speaking in tongues. If it's a Pentecostal church, you pray. That's what we strive for. And that's good. It's good that we want our spiritual being to be whole. And then most of us, obviously, when we are sick, we know we go to the doctor. That's one way of fixing our bodies. We mostly know to eat healthy, even though we don't always eat healthy. But we know that certain illnesses are a result of not nourishing the body well. And we basically know where to go, to correct things that are not right in our bodies. To exercise when we are a bit overweight. We also know that we may need to do a lot more exercises to keep in shape. Or if we choose to neglect it, we neglect knowing that, it's because I'm not doing a lot of exercises, stuff like that. But then we have the soul. I personally feel that the soul has been neglected, both in the church and just in the world. I'm going to specifically look at our emotions and taking special consideration for sensitivity. So I will look at people who are known to be highly sensitive. In society, we tend to label people as sensitive, for showing emotions or wearing their heart on the sleeve. Sometimes it's seen as a weakness, but our emotions are there for a reason. God created us as people with emotions. Sometimes people who are emotional are mistaken to be weak, but that's not necessarily the case. It just means they are more sensitive to emotions. And unfortunately, because sometimes they are not understood, they really struggle, They will struggle because they're not understood. Sometimes people think they're overreacting. And I'm not saying that people don't sometimes overreact, but I'm looking at people who are highly sensitive that sometimes, they are looked at as just people who are not able to manage themselves, which may be the case when maybe you're growing up as a child, and of course some adults are kind of not aware. But when you get to a place of awareness again of your emotional sensitivity, I think people still quite don't understand, because again, we are taught to tuck away our emotions or don't be too loving. Sometimes people tend to want to hide away from people who are loving them a lot, showing them a lot of emotions. There'll be some ways, where people tend to kind of hide, I would say again, because a lot of people are not taught to just express how they feel. It's like they sometimes think it's just open a can of worms. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. If you don't like something and you say, I don't like this. If you like something and you say, I like this. If you are proactive, you actually will save yourself from a lot of emotional harm, because you know how to think ahead of time, instead of, because there's times where these emotions now just come up. This is why people say don't bottle things up. But a lot of times people want to appear, or have been taught to appear to be suppressing their emotions, as a way of showing that they are actually in control. But I personally think that just feeling things can be a sign of boldness. It's okay. You just feel it. It doesn't have to control you, but you feel what you feel. We tend to say, don't follow your feelings, or in the church, I would say, don't be led by your feelings. I think sometimes that can be a little bit too much, though, because again, sometimes you need to feel, you need to feel the atmosphere. You've got to feel that God is in this place, feel if the peace of God is there available for you, feel it, that would be very helpful. If there's no peace, it's important for you to know the peace of God is not in this place, so it will inform your choices. So our emotions are there to communicate with us. Our emotions are there to help us to be aware. People who have been through trauma, this is also very important for people to be able to feel things. If you're around a safe person and you are able to feel, you can tell that this person is safe. There are some people that you're just there and you are safe. You can relax. But there are some people, it may even happen without much interaction with them, and you're feeling completely unsafe. Once you know how to pay attention to emotions, these can actually save even your life. If you are, for example, near somebody who's very harmful and your emotions are firing up, sometimes that's a sign that you need to get out of there. We need to be able to feel. We love one another on a soul-to-soul basis. So our souls are important. You have to understand if somebody is going through a hard time, to be able to know that this person is going through a difficulty. What does it mean? What does it mean to them as a whole? Sometimes people will mask difficulties such that you won't be able to tell. By looking at their bodies, you may not be able to tell that this person is struggling. They may still be praying, and you may not, again, be able to tell. They may be just speaking in tongues and, clapping their hands and doing everything that seems like everything's in place. But when you are in touch with your soul, your emotions, sometimes that can help you actually kind of like guess also what someone else may be going through. And you can also be able to read people a lot more when we're in touch with our souls, with our emotions. I feel like society now is more into self-reliance and, people being more, which again, it's okay to be able to help yourself and everything. But we as human beings, again, we relate on a soul-to-soul basis. We need to know, how is that widow doing? She may be praying, she may be eating well, but how is her soul? Like one special lady would say, how is your heart? I lost my dad in January. So to have somebody who says, how is your heart today? That's beautiful. Because sometimes, you can be caught off guard. Like, actually, I don't even know how I'm feeling today. So it makes you want to think, okay, how am I feeling? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling what I'm feeling? Because it also helps to be able to process things. And also, when we are more in tune with ourselves and embracing our emotions, making sure we nourish our souls. It also helps people around us because, again, most people are taught to just, fight by themselves, ignore the soul, which, again, this is where our mental health, really comes from. So a lot of people will struggle with things that they shouldn't even be struggling with. Sometimes you just need to speak to someone. And again, because we tend to say don't trust people, sometimes we overdo things. If you're feeling like you're going to take your life anytime soon, I think the best thing is just talk to people, talk to someone, If that person stops you from taking your life and then making fun of you later on, I think you still would have gained something that outweighs the negative, though, because they've helped you not to take your life. That would have been the end of you. I recently was speaking to my mom, just trying to explain this as it came to my, thoughts, so I was saying to her, I think people who are said to be sensitive, which again would be people who are more aware of their soul, their emotions, more than the average person. Obviously these are people who we grow up in society, you'd be told that you are too sensitive, you are what, because again, sometimes people don't know how to deal with you, and it's because they don't know also how to actually deal with their own emotions. So it doesn't mean that people are always wrong. But think of this. I'll use the body as an example. Let's say someone has a sore under their feet, So maybe you go to a guardian or a teacher or someone in authority as a child and say, I've been injured, I've got, and they say to you, no, just keep on using that foot, They want you to just keep on pretending like nothing is wrong. And so they just ignore the fact that you're actually been hurt. You may as well just do what you were being told and just keep on using that foot. So you're not even giving it time to heal, because you're just following orders, not necessarily that is helpful to you. So because you're not giving it time to heal, the injury can take longer to heal if it does, or sometimes it can just get worse because it's never healing. And then in the end, you get complications that can actually lead to maybe even the possibility of amputation. And so you're losing a body part, which again is going to affect your whole life, But if you had been able to see what the problem is and get help, you would have known to rest it or not to overbear, in that place, to make sure to use another, tactic, maybe temporarily limp a little bit just to ease the pain, So it's the same with the soul. Imagine that child who needs to be soothed. They're not getting soothed. So they don't actually heal. They grow up not knowing how to. If they don't have anybody in society who helps them, it becomes worse. Again, I love the book titled The Body Keeps the Score. It's a brilliant book. It shows that at least one person, one healthy person around somebody who's going through a hard time can be enough to help them to thrive, So for someone who has got people around in different settings, that could be really helpful. But some people don't have people who understand them. So the struggle becomes so intense, But these, again, tend to be people who would help others when they're going through emotional things. Because they understand emotions, they are the ones who will come to you or who will check on you, who would be calling you so many times because they want to make sure you're okay. But again, when they're going through a hard time, they probably don't get the same amount of calls from various people, but when friendships or relationships from people who are in tune with their souls can be very fulfilling, because that person would know that, I need to check on this person. They'll be able to pay attention. I've got a friend who would say, are you okay? She maybe send a message checking on me, and sometimes she'll just call and she'll be like, I just need to hear you because I can tell from your voice whether you're okay. My mom's like that as well. She may watch a video of mine, sometimes she just ask randomly and say, are you okay? Again, I think from that generation, there's sometimes there would have been that disconnect, I think, with the soul deeply, but with the willingness to learn, it helps. It helps to understand people's souls a lot more. In my case, for example, I will speak to my mom a lot and say, this is how I am. Sometimes she will be surprised by some things, but what I enjoy, what I like about her, what I appreciate is that, when she learns something new, she does take it on board, So it just helps to be able to understand people around us. Again, in church, I've recently just had this thought, just seeing people coming to church. Sometimes people are struggling. People have so many things going on. So being able to just be there for someone who may need to speak to someone, that can be very helpful. We don't want people struggling by themselves, but we need to ask ourselves, what is it that makes people feel that they can't approach me? Or if you are approachable, think about it. It could be that, again, you somehow accommodate people's souls, emotions, not that you should overdo it such that you are putting yourself in danger, but it is an aspect of ourselves that we also need to make sure that we take care of. Be intentional. Personally, I like being intentional about checking on with people. So sometimes it can seem intrusive to people who are not used to it. Sometimes people don't want to trust you, sometimes depending on what they've gone through in life. But it really helps, over time. It can benefit other people. If you are a guardian, an auntie like myself, or a mother and everything, we're not going to be perfect, but it's important to be intentional, because you can actually help someone else to handle situations a lot better. You teach them, my nephew, for example, knows that I'm very intentional about things. I can ask you questions because I want to help you to be able to think about certain things. Boys, for example, are raised to shy away from their emotions a lot. I think we are changing it as a society, but we still have a lot of work to do. And so if there's a boy around, or just young people, it's just to encourage them to just open up and do our best to also be examples to them. Like I'll say in my example, I'll go back again because this is a significant event that has happened, before my dad's passing. I told the children around me, that, what, you're probably going to see a different aspect of me that you've not been used to, because I'll try and check on with them. But now this is going to be, a very emotional experience should dad pass on, which again happened. But then because I already knew myself at that point, I was explaining to them that should we have to deal with a loss, because this is our first significant loss in the family, we may need to have a room that is just available for anyone. If you feel like you just want to grieve, where we know if you go to that room, we just leave you alone, This is being proactive, preparing for the soul, and also just helping them, because if they've known me in a certain way, it can be very traumatizing for people. Imagine you've lost a loved one, you've lost a grandparent that you loved, who loved you, and then another important figure in your life is behaving in a totally weird way, because it would seem like weird, I said to them, I could be irritable, so I just preparing them so they know, what to expect. Obviously, things didn't go to that extreme, but we were aware. So maybe, again, it's just having prepared ourselves so we know we've got to be there for one another. But at the same time, we've got to understand we don't know the journey that we are just about to start, and then also know who to speak to, look around, my kids, for example, I would say at school, we try to find people who are healthy adults. Remember, we had a very difficult time when they were in primary school. So I said to one of the kids, if there's something that you need to speak to an adult about, even if it's not myself, and if you are uncomfortable speaking to me, go speak to the head teacher, because I already knew that the head teacher was a very accommodating person, So just to be able to help them know that it's important to speak to people. We shouldn't always think everybody in society is horrible. I think that's not helpful when we're going through hard times. There are people who'd be willing to help. Yes, there may not be, just a lot of them available, but if you think you are a good person yourself, why do you think that everybody else isn't good? Why would you think that God wouldn't make, someone available to help you? Obviously God is a good God. So if you need to speak to someone, surely he would make someone available for you. I've tried to go all over the place, but these are just my thoughts about, again, let's not forget our soul. Ask yourself, where has this person been? Ask yourself about their childhood. Sometimes people's childhoods affect the way that their souls present. How does this person love? What happened to this person? How can I help them? How can I connect with them? Should I leave them alone? Should I get closer? Sometimes people behave in a way that is unexpected. Like I recently had two people contacting me who I had thought, because I had tried to love them, but I felt like they pulled away. And so I thought, maybe just leave them alone. But I was surprised when I realized that they reached out, and I read what they'd written to me, and I saw that it was actually heartfelt, messages. Then you realize, and I started to think, sometimes people also pull away, not necessarily because it's personal. Sometimes they pull away because they don't know what to do with the love that you are giving them. They may not be familiar with the affection that you are giving them, or they may have been betrayed by people who loved them, And so we still have to make space so that if people need to talk, they should know that they can come to us to talk. Because society has this way of seeming so interested, so shocked, so, animated when it comes to people unaliving themselves. But when they are alive, many people seem to not realize that it's very important to actually be there for someone who is living. Obviously we're not going to force ourselves into people's lives, but I personally think do your best to support people around. If people don't want to engage, then okay, that's a different story. You can try until you don't want to be way too intrusive with them. But just make sure you hold space so that they know that should they need to speak to someone, you're still there available. So we're not only just going to be looking out for people to help us, we also need to do work in ourselves. Like, if you know you've gone through trauma as a child, do the work that needs to be done. Think about what happened to you. There's quite a lot of information. If you can't get therapy, YouTube is jam-packed with resources. Speak up, tell people, this is what I think has gone on in my life, and this is how I think it has affected me. And then keep going. Obviously, we're not saying make excuses. It's just trying to help people to be able to relate with us better. Sometimes people will hear what we're saying, and people who love us will always really make adjustments. Someone who is not much of a feeler, for example, may get that, this is how you are, and they may want to check in sometimes. They would maybe just call, and that, they're just calling to, they're probably feeling awkward, but at least they've called. One of my friends called me just after Dad's passing, and he was like, I normally don't even know what to say, during these times, but I thought I should call. I just appreciate what he did. For me, it was a great demonstration of love. I'm here. I don't know what to say, but I'm here, instead of just disappearing and pretending like it never happened, Yeah. I really hope that my random thoughts have been helpful. If you want book suggestions, I'm willing to look for some books to help along those lines, because I do think again that our societies, our families, our churches have neglected the soul, and sometimes we ourselves neglect our souls because we just don't know what to do. But God is so much interested. He's not going to despise a broken heart, for example. That's what he says. We know God is interested in our hearts. He is interested in how you feel. Some of the feelings, he put them in there. He puts love, love for one another, care for one another. That's how we relate with each other. So thank you very much for the time that you have taken to listen to me.